They had continued onwards with Ben training them in combat and cooking. Luma trying to learn to cook so she doesn't end up like her father when times call for survival. They were still debating over who exactly was going to take over as leader, as they soon had found the pit and docked there so everyone could get out of their ship and stretch their legs for a bit while Rojo's mechanic friend was having the parts for her bike loaded. They'd found that the mechanic friend of Rojo was a woman named Turbine. It didn't take long to get everything moved onto the ship, especially with Ben using forearms to lift the stuff in crates and the like so that they could get it all packed faster. Once they were done, however, they then began heading off with Turbine fixing up the bike while they were on their way to Earth. They were very close to home now. They continued their routine until they were about to get to Earth. The others were still arguing about who's gonna lead, with Ben watching from the side as Reverb launched the disc from his arm and then sending it off to just above the others, with it pointed downwards at them as he called out, "Enough!" with the sonics of the disc pushing them down onto the floor since they were distracted with their argument. Reverb reminded them all that they should be focusing on the upcoming mission. They would be back to Earth soon, and their time would be better spent preparing to face Eon and stop him from getting a hold of the hands of Armageddon. They can argue over who leads after they took down the threat to all of their existences. The other stopped arguing and nodded, sighing, knowing that he was right. He told them all to get back to their rooms and prepare for the oncoming fight, and to finish repairs on Rojo's bike. They might need it for the upcoming battle. Now! They all then scrambled and ran off to do as he'd commanded, with Reverb then sighing about how childish the others were all being, when they should have been focusing on the mission instead. And with a silent nod, Ben slipped away before he was noticed. The group had prepared and the bike was almost completely repaired, as they were all instructed to stop what they were doing because Earth was now within sight and they would be docking at the plumber's base soon, and for all of them to report to the bridge and strap in for procedures, as they sent the info to the base that they were home and ready to land back down on Earth. After getting the clearance to do so, they all were strapped into their seats and headed on down through the atmosphere and back to Bellwood, as the group then flew the ship to the docking bay and carefully touched down, then began to get out once the ship was completely shut down. Ben told them all that they could explore for a moment, as he needed to go report to Max about what's going down. Ship was excited to see Ben and Gwen again and barked his name coming over as Gwen smiled and lifted him up, asking if he'd been keeping an eye on Albedo, to which the little mechamorph barked happily in response to the question. We then see Rook coming over with Albedo following as well, saying that they'd heard the two were finally back on Earth and wanted to see it for themselves. Gwen nodded, telling them that they were finally home on Earth, and began to catch up with them, with Ben telling them he'd catch up later, needed to report to Max, then headed on off to go find his grandfather. He'd found them preparing another of his strange meals, and the two began to talk, with Ben telling him it seems like the idea may work and he might already have a crew ready to do that, but they'll need to wait until later to let Maggie know about everything. They nodded, hearing that, as the base's electronics and the like began to flicker around, and Eon appeared along with Amarillo and Azul, as they began causing problems with the time manipulator, telling the bikers to keep the group busy while he went for what they were after. With a nod, the two former members of Rojo's gang then began to fight with Ben and the group and the plumbers in the base. Eon got into the prison cells and released everyone, looking for one in particular, and finding the one he wanted, he was surprised to see that this one still had all their fur, as the others he'd come across had it burned or melted off in some way. Still, they were what he needed, and told them they could have their revenge if they followed his plans, and the prisoner spoke, agreeing to their terms. The other prisoners began fighting the plumbers as well, though Ben and Albedo, both in the form of forearms, had knocked Amarillo and Azul through the doors as they slid to Eon, asking him to help them, though he'd told the two of them that their usefulness to him, has ended, and teleported out along with the man that he'd helped to escape the prison. The two biker girls then yelled about Eon stabbing them in the back as Rojo told them, "Hurts, doesn't it, being stabbed in the back?" before blasting both of them into the cell that the prisoner Eon took away was in previously. Ben hit the locking mechanism, sealing the two inside, locking them in the cell as she continued to help fight off the prisoners that were attempting to escape. Rook told Ben that he and his team should go after Eon. He and the other plumbers could handle the prisoners here, and he nodded, telling them to be careful, asking Albedo to help out there, and he nodded, saying that he'll help take them down. Then he and Rook could catch up afterwards. Ben then whistled to the crew and called out that they needed to go after Eon. The others could handle things here. With a nod, they began to head off, fighting their way to the U-Watch and chased after them. Ben tells Rojo to set a course for Rome, and she tells him can do as they set in the location and began flying the ship out to there. It didn't take long and they headed off straight for the Mouth of Truth's location once that was done, flying straight there and going higher than any and all air traffic.